next we have our speaker. Deborah is, what particular role do you have in Science.Art.Wonder? Is it just...
I'm an executive member.
Okay, excellent. I'll let her explain more about Science.Art.Wonder, but as you can see, it's an effort to connect the sciences and the arts by connecting literally professors and students who want to make art about what they do. And I think there's going to be a little bit of an interactive thing involving cell phones, so feel free to get those ready. But first, let's welcome up Deborah.
So, as mentioned, my name is Deborah. I'm a sophomore at Emory University, and I'm an exec member at Science for a club called Science.Art.Wonder. And so, I'll just jump right into it. So, I will start my presentation with a quote that I think embodies this presentation really well. And it's a quote by Leonardo da Vinci, and he said, "To develop a complete mind, study the science of art, study the art of science, learn how to see, and realize that everything connects to everything else." So, I'm going to start with the interactive part, and if you guys have cell phones, which in this age I feel like you should, you can text to 22333 and type in that phrase, Deborah Seong 929. And I'm going to first ask you the question, what does science mean to you? So you're going to type in just one word that reminds you of science. It can be data, lab, truth, anything. So if you see Ross on the...
You want to swap over to it?
Yeah, just swap over to it.
Let's do it. Should be the rest of that.
It should
There you go.
be
It's one of those tabs.
the bowling, yeah.
No? Yeah, try that one. There you go.
Okay, insight. We have one. Curiosity, okay. Experiments, good. So I'll give you guys like a few more seconds to put some ideas in. Okay, so I think we can lock it now. Yeah. And so from this like word bubble that we all did, let's choose one. I think measure. Okay, measure is a cool one. And so let's use the word measure to embody like this entire word bubble. And then now I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm going to ask you, think of a word that reminds you of art. So if you pull up the next tab and activate it, yes. And now you can submit a word that will remind you of art. Very, very deep. Expression, beauty. Oh.
I assume size correlates with number of people?
Yeah. Okay, so I feel like we have a lot, so we can now lock it and choose one. So the biggest one being probably color and beauty. So going back to our presentation, and from those two word bubbles, I chose measure and beauty. So from those two poles, could measure and beauty be combined? Could experiments and color be combined? And that's the whole basis of like this presentation that I'm doing, and showing how those two can intersect. So certainly with like what we saw with the word bubble from science and what we saw from the word bubble from art, it could seem as if science and art are these two independent factors, but if you learn more of science, and I don't know how many of you guys have professions in science, but you will learn, as you learn more and more of that field, you realize how much more art is a part of your work. And same for the other side, as you do more of art, you think more of how science can integrate into your masterpieces. So, I feel like in the past, the best representation of like this epitome of the balance between science and art is Leonardo da Vinci. So he really pushed the boundaries of artwork by kind of using both perspectives of beauty and science to affect the way that the viewer will see his artwork. So here we have, I mean, I'm sure everyone here knows Leonardo da Vinci, but if you don't know, I mean, he drew the Mona Lisa, and I guess he applied scientific perspective in one of his famous paintings called The Last Supper. And here you see kind of like the perspective framework of that painting. And you can see how he mathematically calculated how the implied lines in the painting will kind of join together to a convergence point. And so through this, he was not only painting aesthetically, but he was painting with numbers. So I think that's the best, you know, he's a really, as I titled it, steamy genius. Yeah, and then of course, you know, he's very well known for his sketches of inventions and new techniques in engineering, and yes. So first I will talk about the first relationship between science and art. So for scientists and artists, their weaknesses lie on the strengths of the other. So people can get lost in both worlds. For sciences, numbers and lines and all of these like phrases can get dry and confusing. And same for the other side. Art can get like way too abstract and confusing. And so when the artist and science come together, they realize that although their form of communication may be different, what they want to ultimately tell to the public is the same. So they want to communicate a certain perspective in new ways. And so that is the beauty of their combination, and I'm just going to show you guys a few pictures of like science and art combining. But scientists may struggle in communicating to a wider audience that is not often exposed to such complex ideas. And the artist may struggle in communicating to a wider audience who is not often exposed to such abstract ideas. And so when they are together, they have this perfect way of like strengthening each other's communication. Yeah, and so of course there's MC Escher. Who else do I have? Oh, this is like a common theme of like when you type in science and art on Google, there's like the Fibonacci sequence on a whole bunch of paintings. So yeah. So here we have an abstract from one of our researchers in our club. Her name is Eri Sayakawa, and she creates such creative and very outstanding ideas of just environmental science, and her research is very like forward. But when you see this abstract from one of her research papers, it's really easy to get lost in the sauce. Like, you don't know some of these phrases, it's very technical. But take this artwork from Nele Azeved, and he installed 1,000 tiny ice sculptures of men in Australia, and he used the environment surrounding the artwork to cleverly form a thesis against it. So this definitely shows you more of the emotional effect of environmental science. And so in a way, both of this art piece kind of combined those two aspects of air pollution and global warming, along with the visual aspect of it. So certainly, the abstract and the artwork both reveal the truth. So both the artists and scientists wanted to give their perspective on air pollution, but by combining these different representations, we both received the ideas from the logos side, the logical side, which is the research, and the pathos side, which is the more emotional, the art aspect. Yeah. And so, I forgot to mention. Since science represents itself through logos and not much of pathos, for example, while reading a paper about string theory, you might not really think about the emotional value behind string theory. And same for the other side, like art can represent itself through pathos and not much of logos. So when looking at a surrealistic painting of Dali and his melting clocks painting, it's hard to see like the logical reasoning behind that. And so for these embodiments of logos and pathos, the former can easily forget about the latter. And by combining both art and science, the logos and pathos, in a sense, ultimately intensifies the communicative goal that both of them are trying to do. All right, so for the second relationship, so I'm going to turn more to the present and say that there's a really fast-paced movement, at least in my opinion, of how schools and university projects are really trying to combine this aspect of science and art. And when these two combine, they can form more creative ideas, and they both elevate each other. So, for example, the development of ideas and technologies and paradigm shifts in the sciences can elevate art. And one example of this is like architecture. When physicists research different ways that gravity can flow downwards and new ways that will allow humans to manipulate it, artists, in effect, will create really cool architectural sculptures and buildings. Likewise for art, as you can see here, as art has new forms of capabilities of expression, they will be able to form animations and 3D models and possibly hypothetical experiments for researchers and even aesthetic values of robotics, which may even help their function. So, that all connects with our goal of our club, Science.Art.Wonder. And who we are is, who are we, sorry. We are an Emory University-based club who matches artists and researchers on campus or around Atlanta, and they come together to create this ultimate piece of artwork that will be showcased in events around Atlanta. So that's the basis of who we are, and our mission, again, is from the first half of my presentation, basically is communicating the capability and this wonderful effect that can happen, or wonderful reaction that can happen from science and art combining. And so, I will go through the process of what we do. And the artist first applies through a link, and the researcher applies if they are interested in having this partnership. And by the end of October, they match, and they meet, and they think of ideas that both will create, like both the scientific validity of like each art, the validity of the artwork that the artist creates, but also an aesthetic appeal that will, again, be exposed to a wider audience. And then we showcase it. So I will show you a few examples of the artwork that we had last year. The first one is from Alex. She's actually here, and she was partnered with Dr. Sementelli. And to give a very, I guess, brief summary of this artwork, is basically she showed how proteins and ions self-assemble into really complex structures. And when they do this, it's like it's called a redox reaction. And the process she used to dye the silk in this artwork is also a redox reaction. So she kind of used both aspects of science and art. I feel like I'm saying that phrase a lot. Here's the second artwork. It's the partnership between Dr. Wu and Madsen. And Dr. Wu researches the biomechanics of elephant trunks. And ultimately what Madsen was trying to show was the elephant is pretty obvious, but also the future applications of her research. So is it going to be used in a positive light, such as disaster relief machinery? Or is it going to be used in a negative light, such as military equipment? So that kind of duality is seen in her artwork. And then our third example is one from a researcher who did her own artwork. So this is one by Dr. Carol Cieles, and she is an astrophysicist. And she studies a lot of cool stuff, but mainly the ripples of space-time and black holes. So here she showed a process through acrylic pour, how two stars meet together, and when they meet together and like they're in the same, resonate the same way, a beam of light just flashes through, and then a black hole is formed. So she kind of showed the process through her artwork. And then the fourth one we have is between Dr. Jakey and Daniel So. So he is showing how he is showing the sharing and the behavior of cooperation and food sharing between bonobos. Sorry, I'm running out of breath. But so in the first kind of line, you see bonobos sharing, a very abstract figure of bonobos sharing, and they're all connected. But in the background, you also see the chemical structure of oxytocin, which is the hormone that is used of sharing between bonobos. And then lastly, we have a very simple one, but it is between Dr. Taylor and Amy Lambeth. And Dr. Taylor researches nodes in systems and networks that interact within Atlanta. So Amy Lambeth kind of showed Atlanta on a chip and showed the flow and energy of people and technologies on this chip component. So yeah, those are a few examples of our showcase, of our artwork that we got last year. And now for showcasing. So we have showcased around Atlanta Science Festival, and there you can see we also did a interactive mural along for the kids who passed by. We also had an event on campus, so we had artwork just hanging around in the chemistry building and in the main students, we call it Whitehall, and in the quad, even outside. And then this is how we got to be able to connect. This is how we were able to be connected with Sunday Assembly. We also went to the Rally for Science. And so, yeah. And for SAW, I feel like it can be confusing for people at first, but the lasting impact that we want to show in the end is the two relationships of science that I first mentioned. Is that, firstly, when you have this connection between science and art, it kind of shows both the pathos and logos, and will be presented to a wider audience. And of course, we also want to show the second relationship, where science and art can elevate each other. And then I'm going to conclude with like a whole cycle of coming back to Leonardo da Vinci's quote of how he said, to develop a complete mind, study the science of art and the art of science. So I kind of saw that as like the logos of art and the pathos of science. And learn how to see. So because of that combination, we get new perspectives on how we see around our world. And then realize that everything connects to everything else. So because of that connection, we can see a world in a way with more curiosity, whether it's about science, whether it's about art, or whether it's about questions about society or human condition. So that is my presentation. Thank you for listening.